Howdy, y'all. It's time for another episode. I'm sorry I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, you didn't at all. I was just going to say hi to the people.
Oh, okay.
So hello to you people.
That's the kind of production you're dealing with here, folks. Anyway.
We'll cut it all together in post. It'll be fine.
We'll fix it. So another fine episode of Corey and Matt talk about thing. And this week, we got some exciting stuff for you. We got a nice announcement that you're going to have to listen to the show to hear.
Arguably the biggest announcement ever.
Exactly. There's an event, and so, yeah, you're going to want to hear about it.
Listen.
But, yeah, mostly. Well,
Monly
Monly So this week is our long-promised preview of the NC Comicon and the ComiQuest Film Festival, both of which are awesome, and you should go. And a little bit about the new X-Men Days of Future Past trailer at the very end, but mostly we're talking about the cool events this weekend. This is recorded on, what is the date? November 4th, 2013.
November 4th, 2013.
So, listen for the music, and we'll be back with you in a second. Talk about a little more in-depth the NC Comicon and the ComiQuest Film Festival, and that day has come.
It is upon us.
At long last. So, I feel like we have probably a little less to say about the Comic-Con as far as guests. I'm not as familiar with all these fellows, but we'll zip through that.
Talk about them a little bit.
Yeah.
The audience might like to know.
Exactly. So,
we loves the audience.
I've got the guest page in front of me. And so let's see. First on that, we've got Josh Adams, who I am not personally familiar with, but he's listed as being from Doctor Who and Batman Odyssey. I don't know if that is writer or artist in that sense. Let's see, Neil Adams. Now
everybody know who's
everybody know him.
Neil Adams, for God's sake.
X-Men, Batman, Green Lantern. I believe did he do the Speedy is a heroin addict storyline in?
That sounds familiar.
Because that was in that was like the Green Lantern Green Arrow team up book that was in.
I recall the thing that I remember most about Neil Adams is the fact that he drew every comic book that DC produced for a 10-year period in the 80s. Yeah. That's what I remember about Neil.
He was a workhorse. They don't make them like that anymore.
No, sir.
So let's see. I did a quick...
Or George Perez. Either Neil Adams or George Perez drew every comic book DC produced in the 1980s.
Well, George was more of a 70s, 80s guy.
Yeah.
So, but he would have been like just before, I think.
Neil's worked on everything. I mean, Neil's a big deal. I mean, he's a serious, not quite Stan Lee, Jack Kirby-esque level, but almost. He's like that next tier.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Let's see. James Asmus, who's listed as Quantum and Woody, Gambit, In Times of Bram and Ben. I'm not familiar with any of that. Let's see.
Is it Gambit from the X-Men? Does he have his own? Okay.
Well, actually, I think that probably is. I don't know of another Gambit.
That's the only Gambit I'm familiar with. But anyway, that guy.
Yeah. Jeremy Bastian, who not familiar with him either.
He does have a nose ring, though.
Yep.
So you can tell he's an artist.
There's that. Bob Burden, who I am familiar with, but I've never read any of his stuff. Flaming Carrot and Mystery Men.
Which, of course, is screening at the film festival.
The ComiQuest Film Festival.
So we'll talk about Mystery Men a little bit later.
We'll come around to it. Bernard Chang, who I have heard of, but I couldn't immediately tell you what he's done. I think it's mostly DC stuff, which I'm not as into these days.
And the next guy's your boy.
Yep, Frank Cho, good girl artist extraordinaire, creator of Liberty Meadows, etc., drawer of bodacious babes.
Should you recount your personal story with Frank Cho?
I think I shall.
Yes.
So he just started coming to Heroes Con, I don't know, 5-ish years ago, somewhere in there.
Indeed, I remember. I was there with you.
And he always gets a booth with his buddy Brandon Peterson, who he does mostly covers these days, but he got to start on Uncanny X-Men, I think. But anyway, so he and his buddy Frank always sit together and bullshit around.
Frank Cho and Brandon.
Yep, have general fun.
Yep. They always look like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
Whenever you go up there.
Well, why else would you go?
Yep.
Oh, well, you're getting paid. That's why else you would go.
I've seen some of these guys at the cons that did not look like they were having a particularly pleasant time.
Certainly.
They were kind of angry to be there and angry that you're speaking to them.
Yeah, exactly.
But Frank was not this sort of guy.
No, it's quite genial. So I've got a little sketchbook that I occasionally take around to get these guys to draw in if I'm not intruding. And Frank Cho, like, I knew he didn't have time to do a full-blown sketch, and I didn't, I never know what to do. I'm, like, very specific about what I want him to draw or just, whatever. So I just asked him, as polite as I knew how, like, could I just get a quick sketch of whatever he felt like doing?
But, yes, and you, like you said, you're thinking you're being polite because, this is a busy guy, and you don't want to go up to him and be, demanding.
Right.
So you're saying, basically, Mr. Cho, draw me whatever you feel comfortable drawing.
Right, because I've heard it from both sides. I've heard guys who are like, I hate, just tell me what to do. I don't want to have to sit here and think about it. And then other guys are like, oh well, yeah, I like the chance to do shit I wouldn't normally do. So I do not know.
Correct.
But what I said was draw anything.
Mm-hmm.
At which point his buddy Brandon pipes up and says, be careful, he might draw a giant throbbing cock. He's been known to do it. He did not do this. He drew me Truman the Duck from his Liberty Meadows comic strip. So thankfully, I can still show my sketchbook to families.
In retrospect, though, really,
it would have been pretty awesome
to have a big throbbing cock drawn by Frank Cho. And I imagine he could draw a good one. That's just a guess.
I haven't checked for eBay to see if there are existing throbbing cocks drawn by Frank Cho, but there could be.
Probably going for good money.
I've never Googled for that, but I'd be afraid of what else I might turn up.
He certainly turns a deft hand to the female anatomy.
Certainly,
we've seen that many times.
Certainly, he's a fellow fan of the Jennifer Connelly-esque woman,
and good for him.
The '80s version, not so much like she looks these days, but. So yeah. Anyway, that was a pretty big snag for the old NC Comicon. I thought he is not small potatoes. So the next guy on the list to move along here, Brian Clevenger, who is I think best known for Atomic Robo, which I've read a little of and liked a lot. It's kind of Hellboyish with a little more of a comedic cast to it.
Nice.
Next guy up, Jeff Darrow, who. He's worked a lot with Frank Miller. He did, was it Hard Boiled?
Yeah, that's what I know him from.
Yeah.
It's Hard Boiled.
Big Guy and Rusty, and lots of other stuff. But those are at least the big two I know him from.
Another guy, really, that came to the fore in the 80s.
Yep. And he can draw like a motherfucker.
Yes, he
makes
can.
me tired to look at it.
He can draw a picture.
So let's see. Next guy, Michael DeVito, a publisher.
Yep.
Third World Studios. Don't know much about him.
It's Danny DeVito's nephew.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was going to say illegitimate son, but that works.
Some sort of bastard offspring. I have no idea who he is.
You be the judge. So the next guy is Tommy Lee Edwards, who I believe lives in North
I
Carolina.
believe that's right.
And you probably know him best, or I do, as the artist of Marvel's 1985 limited series not too long ago, which it's kind of a side conversation I'd like to have at some point. 1985, kind of disappointed they never really did anything else with that. You know, they just kind of put it out and left it. I don't know if it wasn't successful or what, but
I would suspect it was not successful.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it personally. I thought it was really good.
Right,
but it was high concept.
It's like many things. I think it was aimed squarely at our demographic.
That's right,
and not very much outside that.
Yeah, it would be hard to explain it, but if you ever have a chance, the series, the miniseries 1985 is worth reading.
Yep, is quite good. I have a story idea about that as well, but I won't go into it. So we'll put a pin in that for some future show. Ding. And I don't know. We'll talk about that later. So let's see. Next guy, Adam. That's ATOM with an exclamation point. Freeman, who's apparently the Valiant Entertainment sales manager, and he appears to be eating a cheeseburger in this picture. Kevin Freeman, who President Action Labs Entertainment. Mm-hmm. Christos Gage, who I've heard of. He's a writer. Done some, I want to say some Image stuff, although don't quote me on that. Here he's listed as Bloodshot and Hardcore. Those are two separate. Well, no.
No,
it's listed as one, but I know Bloodshot used to have his own series, and as did Hardcore. Absolution and Avengers Academy, which Avengers Academy I have read. So let's see. The next guy, Sanford Green, I want to say is mostly an inker, but again, I'm not 100% sure. Let's see.
I've seen that guy at Heroes Con before.
Yep. Let's see. Tony Harris, who probably best known for Ex Machina. Also Starman. Probably it might be a toss-up as to which one he's better known for. And JSA Liberty Files is his other credit here. Let's see. Jamal Engel, who... he's an artist, but I forget if he does mostly pencils or mostly inks. Let's see. Dan Jurgens. That was another big get, I thought. The man who killed Superman.
Dan Jurgens, big, yeah. I mean, one of the best-selling story arcs in comic history, The Death of Superman.
I would argue largely responsible for the DC House style around that time as well.
Yeah, he was almost like the John Byrne of DC during that time.
Everybody either was him or drew like him.
He wrote and drew Death of Superman, did he not?
I'm sure he did, yeah. I know he was writing Superman around that time. Right. I don't know if he wrote that particular story, although I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And incidentally, his almost became a much bigger deal because basically that Death of Superman storyline, before we eventually got the Bryan Singer adaptation of Superman, was going to be the basis for the Tim Burton Superman, which we never got.
Yep.
And if you look at the pre-production stuff, that's a blessing from Jesus.
So we all dodged a bullet.
That never occurred, but yeah, it was going to be based on the Death of Superman.
Such a weird story. Script by Kevin Smith. We've all heard that Kevin Smith story about John Peters. I won't go into it, but it's
mechanical spider bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's on his one of his DVDs. So let's move along here.
Got Bob Keane.
Yep. It's SFX master, Hellraiser, Highlander.
In one of his movies will also be screening.
Indeed so, and we'll come to that. Heidi McDonald, editor of Vertigo Cartoon Network, comicsbeat.com. I might be wrong. I feel like she's local, but I'm not sure. Oh, wow, I didn't catch this one. Kevin McGuire from the old Justice League. Justice League International, world's finest. I don't know if he co-created the whole blah ha ha thing that was going on in the 80s with them, or if that was mostly Keith Giffen, but he drew a lot of it. I know that.
Yep. That's what I know him from.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how you say Jeff's name. I guess it's Marriott, only it's got an E. So Mariotti? I don't know.
Sorry about that if we screwed it up, Jeff.
Yeah, man, nothing personal. It's we'll be happy to be corrected. Let's see, Ron Mars, who is listed as Witchblade and Green Lantern. I believe he didn't he create Kyle Rayner, that whole strain of Green Lantern? He is an enemy of many old school Green Lantern fans because of that. I remember him best from his Silver Surfer days.
Me too.
I haven't read as much of, any of his Green Lantern, really. Let's see, Ben McCool.
Good old Ben.
That's a cool name. I know that. Not familiar with his work otherwise. Let's see. Chad Netherland, who I'm not familiar with. Carrie Nord, who's an artist. Conan, Exo Manowar. Trying to think of something I've read that he's done, which I know I have, but I can't recall. Here's another one I didn't know they had. Phil Noto.
Oh, yep.
So he's a very fine artist. Does a lot of covers and whatnot. He did the graphic novel Infinite Horizon, which I bought but have not read yet. Trigger Girl 6, which I haven't read. Ghost for Dark Horse. Let's see. Who's next on the list? Dan Parent, who I'm not familiar with. Mike Perkins, who, let's see, I am also not familiar with. David Peterson, likewise, sorry. Marcy Rockwell. She appears to be eating a cookie in her picture.
Marcy, cookie eater.
I'm sure that's how she'd like to be known.
And she's got like the arm. She's eating the arm off of some anthropomorphic cookie.
Yeah, it looks like maybe a gingerbread man of some kind.
Yep.
It's hard to say.
She's laying into it. Good job, Marcy.
Let's see. David A. Rodriguez.
It's that guy.
Oh, my goodness. Dinesh Shamdasani?
That's it. I believe you've pronounced that correctly, my good man.
That's a guess. I don't know.
Dinesh is right. I can tell you that much.
Circle gets a square.
Because Dinesh D'Souza was a political figure in the Ronald Reagan White House, and so Dinesh is absolutely correct.
Right.
And I think that looks like you've got his last name right as well.
Yep. Well, we're going to go with that.
Maybe Shamdashani.
Yeah.
But something close.
I'm a poor redneck, so, there's only so much you can expect of me.
We're doing the best we can.
Exactly.
With our limited public school education.
So one high school in my home county.
He's the CEO, apparently, and founder of Valiant Entertainment.
Oh, there you go. Well, I guess the founder of the latest one.
Yeah.
Valiant's been around a few times.
The latest incarnation, as it were.
Yep. Gail Simone, who is a writer of renown with DC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of their Bat Universe stuff. Let's see. Fred Van Lint, also a writer of some renown from quite a few different things. I know he's done some Marvel stuff.
Yeah, I know him. The only thing I know him from is Alpha Flight.
Yeah. Let's see. Daniel Way, also a writer. I think I'm more familiar with his Marvel stuff than anything else. Let's see.
And last but not least,
Jeremy Whitley, who I'm not familiar with.
And yet wrote NFL Rush Zone, or perhaps drew it. I'm not sure what that is, but that's something that I find interesting on his list of works.
I cannot say. And while he's not a direct guest, we also have Chris Hardwick, who will be performing at the Carolina Theater Friday night on November 8th.
Yep.
I believe there are still tickets for that, although just in the nosebleeds, of course, because those have been on sale for a pretty good while.
Chrissy Chris!
Who can say if Mr. Hardwick will remain in town for any sightseeing or anything? My guess would be he would not.
Well,
you never know.
You never know. Now that Hugh Laurie tweeted about the Carolina Theater,
that's very very true.
We could be a hot spot, a destination.
Exactly. We're coming up.
For the rich and famous.
It's hard, but we're trying to come up.
You shredded like a Julian salad.
What did he say? Let's bring up that tweet.
Hugh Laurie, yes, was performing. Those of you that aren't aware, Hugh Laurie is the actor Hugh Laurie that he's been in a ton of stuff, but of course most famous for his role as Gregory House.
No relation.
No relation. On House MD. And also he was, I don't know what the character's name was, the dad in the Stuart Little movies.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't I? Forgot all about that.
And does a American accent so well that, quite honestly, had no idea the man was British.
I didn't either.
Until I saw him on a talk show.
He fooled Bryan Singer with that, too.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Bryan Singer did not, when he got his audition tape, he did not know he was British.
No, I would have had no idea. He could have lived his whole life. He could have lived his whole life incognito as a phantom American, and I would have been none the wiser.
Possibly Canadian, but
yeah.
But yeah, he was in town recently, and he said, and I quote, "Carolina Theater in Durham, North Carolina, a beautiful 1920s temple of culture and amusement. What is a town without a place like this at its center?
There you go.
Nothing. That's what it is.
Not even worth mentioning, Corey. Not even worth mentioning if you don't have something like the beautiful Carolina Theater.
Exactly.
We should probably mention that Hugh Laurie is an accomplished musician.
Yes.
And he was performing
That's
at
what
the
he
Carolina.
was doing. Yeah,
That's why it was. He didn't just happen through. Now, it would have been even cooler if he had just sat down at his MacBook Pro and, the Carolina Theater of Durham.
It was pretty hot. That's what I heard.
These guys are awesome at the Carolina Theater. But no, he was actually performing there. And it was a very nice compliment from an accomplished and seems to be a really decent guy.
Yep. And played to a sold-out crowd in the wonderful Fletcher Theater. So that's 1,000 strong.
If you have never been to the lovely Carolina Theater or the glorious Fletcher Hall therein, you're missing out.
Yep.
It's the best place to see a movie, to see a show, to really do anything in the Triangle area.
Now is the time. Seize the day.
Do it while you can.
So, speaking of the Carolina Theater, this will be our big news for the show, and B, a good segue to the second half of our conversation.
Do you have big news?
I do. The biggest of news.
Are you going to reveal big news here on this podcast?
I don't know about the biggest of news. The biggest news we've had thus far.
Holy shit.
Many of you might be familiar with the Retro Phantasma film series that is put on by our good buddy Jim at the Carolina Theater.
Jim Carl, Director of Programming.
There you go. But basically, it used to be pretty much just like science fiction movies, would occasionally screen on Friday nights. You get a nice double feature for $8. Now they've expanded. You've got your retro classics, your retro treasures. So you've got your science fiction, you've got your Hollywood classics, you've got your lesser known but no less important movies. So basically, there's something for everybody. You can get whatever kind of retro suits you.
Yeah, you've got three, basically. You've got three retro series. Retro Treasures, the original Retro Phantasma, and then Retro Classics. Retro Treasures could be any drama, comedy, anything from
pretty much any point in
Hollywood's
history.
Illustrious past.
Right.
And then you've got Retro Phantasma, which focuses mainly on science fiction and fantasy from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
His rule is basically what? It has to be more than 20 years old?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
The early 90s just got pulled into it recently.
Yep.
And then, of course, Retro Classics are science fiction and fantasies films from the 50s and 60s, typically.
Right.
And earlier.
Which brings us to our big news.
This is it.
We, Corey and Matt, are going to be sponsoring the showing of Gojira.
Gojira!
That's the original uncut Japanese version of Godzilla, the Raymond Burles version. That's going to be December 6th, and the other show is going to be Forbidden Planet. But Gojira shows first, and that's the one you really need to show up for. We want all our friends to come out and tell him why. When you see Jim, tell him why.
Sponsored by America's favorite podcast.
That's right. Undeniably.
Maybe the world's favorite podcast.
You cannot debate us on that.
Do not argue.
There'll be some furniture moving.
We know it is true. But yes, Corey and Matt talk about Splitting Together will indeed be sponsoring the RetroClassics showing of Gojira on December 6th at 7 p.m. It's exciting, exciting stuff.
It's a fine Friday night. It's as fine a Friday as you can find anywhere.
$8. What is it, $8 now?
Yep.
$8
$8
for 2 movies? That's a good deal.
It's redonkulous. You can't beat it. And the concessions are quite reasonably priced as well. And you know when you spend that money, it's going to a good cause, the very building you're in.
Is it going to the deep corporate pockets of some horrible hegemon?
No,
Corey?
sir. No, sir.
Is it going into the pockets of some capitalist greedy bastard like Bill Gates?
No, sir.
No, it's going right into Durham's lovely, own, charming, non-profit Carolina Theater. There is no better cause.
So there you go, folks. If you are not there, you are not our friend. That's just how that is.
It's tantamount to a hate crime against us.
Exactly. We will shun you if we see you on the street.
Do you want to take the risk of being shunned? And not just when we see you on the street. Even if we're not around you, make no mistake, we're shunning.
They're shunning. There's shunning you. Happening. We're doing preemptive shunning right now because I know some of you ain't going to be there. I already know it.
Your ass is going to get shunned.
Yep.
I mean, take that risk if you want to.
That's just how it's going to be. So, deal with it.
It's fun times.
So yes, Carolina Theater. It's our segue into the ComiQuest Film Festival playing concurrently with the NC Comicon. And let's have a look at the films that are going to be showing. The first is, of course, Batman the movie, the 1966 version.
Yeah, this is the Dana-na-na-na-na-na.
That's
Batman.
right. Of course, one of my favorite scenes where he's trying to get rid of the bomb. I believe unless I'm mistaken, the first appearance of the bat shark repellent. Possibly the only appearance, but I'm thinking the first at the very least.
Yep.
So if that's your thing, it's going to be showing.
And who didn't watch that as a kid? That should be fond memories for everybody.
I know.
Because they ran that in syndication. They probably still run it in syndication, but certainly in heavy rotation all up through the 80s.
Oh, hell yeah. Because it's too old for you and I to have seen it at first run, but we certainly saw plenty of it when we were youngsters.
And if you haven't seen Batman the movie, starring, of course, the immortal, those guys that are immortal.
Adam West.
Adam West and Burt Ward, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, in this, it's got all 4 of the big, the baddies, the biggest villains are all in there.
Oh, yeah, it's got the whole
Penguin, Joker, Riddler, and Catwoman, all in it.
Yep.
So it's like all the Joel Schumacher Batmans jammed into one, except entertaining.
Except this is good.
Except enjoyable to watch.
I mean, enjoyable for what it is. I mean, you aren't going to go in there being like, that was better than The Dark Knight.
That's not going
to happen.
No, that's not. They're sort of shooting for different things.
Yeah, exactly. But what they're shooting for, they hit squarely. So we'll put it that way. Now, is it the Julie Newmar version of Catwoman?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I think it is.
That sounds right to me.
At any rate, if that matters.
We'll leave it to you, as a surprise. The next movie on the list is a underrated, to my mind, science fiction movie.
I agree.
Science fiction horror, more horror, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
The Crow.
Action as well. Yep. Science fiction action.
Starring the late Brandon Lee.
Yep. The infamous for that reason.
Yep.
Filmed in North Carolina, I believe.
Right down in Wilmington.
Yep.
If people listening aren't familiar, Brandon Lee, of course, the son of the legendary martial arts expert and movie star Bruce Lee,
who also died tragically.
Yep. But Brandon died in a terrible accident involving a blank gun that wasn't properly taken care of.
Yep.
Prior to filming, and they had to basically cut the rest of the movie around him because they hadn't finished filming all of his scenes when the accident occurred.
Yeah, there was a lot of double work, some digital stuff, and to their credit, I could not tell you where one starts and the other stops.
No, they did a good job.
Yeah. So yeah, it's worth seeing for that, if for nothing else. But on top of it, I think it's a good movie too. Alex Proyas, I've liked all of his movies. Certainly, Dark City is one of my favorites, but we won't go into that. So yeah, well worth checking that out. Ernie Hudson is also in that.
Of Ghostbusters fame,
indeed. This next one I'm only familiar with in the sense that I remember seeing bits of it in a Beastie Boys video.
Yep. It's used in a lot of commercials and videos.
But this is Danger Diabolic, and I don't know too much more I can say about it.
It's directed by Mario Bava, who's known better for his horror work.
Oh, okay.
And
that's why it's good there are two of us having this conversation.
Yeah, Mario Bava's an Italian director, well known mainly for his contributions to the horror genre, but he's ventured outside of it. He directed the horror film Planet of the Vampires, which a lot of people credit as being some of the source material or some of the place where Ridley Scott went to for Alien.
Oh.
And so yes,
did not know that.
This is of course not a horror movie. It's not even really a superhero movie. It's a movie basically that centers on a supervillain.
Okay, well, you know more about it than I do already. But that's showing. It looks like 3 times, once per day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. This is the animated Batman.
The best one, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, the best animated for sure. A lot of people would argue the best Batman, bar none.
Yeah, that's going too far, but it's definitely the best animated.
Right, there's
Batman.
a case to be made, certainly. The best, certainly one of the best adaptations from one form to another.
I would certainly agree if you threw out the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I would certainly argue it's the best Batman adaptation.
Yeah, I think that's eminently reasonable. A really good animated movie, and also quite depressing. Really,
right. It's a serious animated movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably why it didn't do well.
It's the sort of thing that you don't see in American animation too much.
No, and well, yeah, America clearly was not ready for it because nobody went to see it, which is a shame. But yeah. So there you go. If you haven't seen that on the big screen, the next one
is something. The next one's something I'm really excited about because I'm a huge fan of this series, and it's something you just don't get to see.
Exactly, and that's the Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. This is also an ultra rare 35 millimeter screening.
Right. So
film. Damn it.
I don't know if you can hear the dog drinking. I mean, he's drinking the shit out of it. It's like he's got a bowl of something that was poured out of Alison Brie's corset. I mean, he is drinking it hard. Anyway,
it's thirsty.
Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. In the 70s and 80s, for you young folk, this sort of thing happened a lot, where if a TV show was going to be popular or perceived to be popular, or they wanted to build up anticipation for the TV show, a lot of times they would take the television pilot and release it theatrically.
Yep.
And this is what you have here. This is actually the the Buck Rogers and the 25th Century pilot packaged into a feature film. They also did the same thing with Battlestar Galactica.
Yep.
Which I've also been privileged to see at the Carolina Theater. But yes, this will be it's pretty short. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, I think, hour and a half at the outside.
It's it's light, it's fluffy, it's entertaining.
And if you've never seen the opening sequence to Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, the movie, now they would make small changes between the theatrical version and the TV pilot version, in as much as they would be racier. And the introduction, the title sequence for Buck Rogers in the 25th Century is straight pornography. I mean, there's the
legendary folks.
It's Gil Gerard, Aaron Gray,
yep,
and Pamela Hensley, the three leads of basically
Is that, Ardala?
Ardala, exactly, wallowing around. Well, the ladies are wallowing around in see-through, shimmering garments for the entire song and the entire length of the credits. Yeah. It's really all that occurs. It's worth the price of admission by itself.
Yeah, so if you're bringing kids in, you might want to come in about 5 minutes late.
It's the sort of thing that seemed oddly appropriate in 1970 whatever, that you probably would not get away with now.
No.
Because this was a PG showing. But just be aware. I think they've screened this once before, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they, yeah.
And indeed,
during a escapism years ago,
a man got up and took his daughter out of the title sequence of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
Didn't know what he'd gotten into. If he'd just hung around a little longer, it'd been all right.
Yeah, it'd been nothing. The title sequence is by far the raciest thing.
The damage is done at that point.
Beady.
So the next item up for bids is Dick Tracy, and I have never actually seen it.
I am looking forward to seeing it again. I saw it one time.
The Warren Beatty one, of course, we're talking about.
Yep, co-starring with Madonna, because they were a romantic number at the time.
Yep.
As she seemed to be with every leading man she had there for a while.
Yeah.
She did the same thing with Sean Penn.
And certainly Warren Beatty was something of a man-ho himself.
Warren Beatty has been known to date a woman or two. Is what we're telling you.
He's been down everything but the Titanic.
So that was a rhino getting killed in the jungle. I meant it to be like a foghorn, but it was
violent.
It's more like a dying jungle animal.
Goodness.
But hey-o! There we go. We'll just go with Ed McMahon next time. Dick Tracy.
Yes, you are correct, sir.
It was a long and complicated track to get this movie made. It went through many different directors, not unlike Superman Returns.
Yeah.
A lot of directors, a lot of producers. Finally, Warren Beatty took over the whole package. And the movie did quite well, financially and critically, and then got stuck. The rights got argued about and thrown into a never-ending court case. Beatty has wanted to make a sequel to it since the movie came out and has been unable to. Huh. And as recently as last year is still attempting to do so, although he's 89 now. Right. But, I guess he could still do it. An underrated comic book adaptation, I've always thought. I'm looking forward to seeing it again because I haven't seen it since the original theatrical run. It came out right around the same time frame as Tim Burton's Batman. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of people, it didn't compare favorably in the minds of a lot of avid comic book people to that.
But it was a different animal, too, which I don't think a lot of people got.
Yeah, totally different. And in that Warren Beatty went specifically to make it as comic strip-like as possible. That was his entire goal. Mm-hmm. Whereas Burton, on the other hand, although it seems impossible to imagine now, Tim Burton's Batman was a fairly dark and gritty, at the time, considered a dark and gritty version of Batman.
Oh, yeah.
It seems corny now in retrospect. But
it was 89.
Dick Tracy's definitely worth checking out.
So the next one I have not seen, Hardware is the name of this movie, but it's apparently a product of the guy we mentioned before, Bob Keane, the SFX guy. who is going to be
in attendance.
Yep, he's at the comic show, and he's going to be at the screening. So if you're just a person who likes sci-fi movies, you like special effects, etc., you can't go wrong.
No, you can't. And the movie Hardware, I'm also looking forward to trying to get in there and see, because it's been well reviewed, and it's one of these movies like, for example, another good example would be Pumpkinhead, which was directed by the special effects, legendary special effects man Stan Winston, that did effects for The Thing and The Terminator, and among other things,
a legend.
Jurassic Park, and these are low-budget movies, but you can count on them, just like with Pumpkinhead, having some really unique and interesting effects, because the guys that are directing these movies are special effects wizards, and Bob Keane just knows what he's doing. So even though it has a low budget, you're going to see a higher quality production value than you might expect.
Right. It ain't going to be your typical low-budget Sci-Fi Channel movie of the week or anything like that.
Exactly.
Now, what can we say about this one?
How can you add to the legend that is
Megaforce?
That's right. If you haven't seen Megaforce, don't let anything stop you.
Oh my Lord! Yes, I don't even know if words can prepare you for.
It's directed by another legendary director, actually, that started out as
a stuntman.
Yep. Hal Needham, who we know him best for the Smokey and the Bandit movies, and really
Cannonball
directed most of Burt Reynolds' 70s output. Frankly, anything Burt Reynolds did in the 70s, Stroker Ace, anything he did in the 70s that was a racing redneck comedy type movie, probably Hal directed it. Also, 80s cult classic Rad, which was a skateboarding flick. If you've never seen it, wow, Megaforce is one of those movies that's just so entertaining. Its ambitions are very clear cut, and it fails spectacularly to meet any of them.
Oh my, so very spectacularly,
and yet still so entertaining, because it does everything it does with such gusto. It stars Barry Bostwick, who later became famous for his role.
Stop right there, man. Barry Bostwick.
Barry Bostwick is the star of this movie, along with Persis Kambata of Ilea fame from Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
With hair.
Has hair.
With hair.
In this movie. So shit, that's worth the money right there.
If you ever wondered what the bald chick Star Trek: The Motion Picture looked like with hair, here you go.
She was a former Miss Universe. Good-looking woman. Anybody that can get away with being completely bald and still be pretty attractive, as she was in Star Trek, she's got to be pretty fine.
Yep.
But anyway, Barry Bostwick, who was later probably more famous for his role in the Michael J. Fox vehicle Spin City. He was the mayor in that. Now, here's the funny thing I'm going to tell you, Corey. The funny thing is the character that Barry Bostwick plays, the goofy, clueless mayor from Spin City, is really tonally no different whatsoever than the action star Ace Hunter he plays in this movie. So it's
basically like he retired from crime fighting and became a mayor.
Exactly. If you think about Spin City while you're watching Megaforce, you can absolutely interchange the characters at any point with no detriment to either script.
Nice. I was not aware of that. Now, I've certainly seen Megaforce. I saw it in the theater. I'm proud to say.
Yep.
My brother took me when I was a youngster.
Oh, it was a big deal.
I never saw Spin City, though.
Flying motorcycles, everything a 12-year-old boy might want to see.
Shit, yeah, man. And I loved it. And we should also note Hal Needham recently passed away.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, see this in his memory.
Hal, who was a really good man and made a lot of money and quite a bit of acclaim in Hollywood, when really this wasn't something a stuntman did at the time. He was not encouraged to direct.
Well, still isn't.
It mainly ridiculed for attempting to direct movies, and went on to have an impressive and successful career.
Absolutely. So go pour one out for Hal Needham. You can get alcohol at the Carolina
You
Theater.
pour it out right from the concession stand.
In case we haven't mentioned that. I mean, don't pour out much because poor people have to clean it up.
Yeah, it's like a drop.
But yeah, just symbolically is what we're saying.
Even maybe just pour a few drops out on a napkin and clean it up
exactly.
your damn self.
Exactly.
But pour some out.
Like you have some couth. So we mentioned Bob Burden. Of course, we have Mystery Men
next on the agenda,
which I like a lot. Even calling it cult might be generous.
It's like the soft drink Tab. If you've ever had a Tab, it's not something
old school Tab, not
old school Tab, right? It's not something that many people particularly care for, but those of us who do enjoy it a lot.
Yep, it's got a rather surprising cast: Greg Kinnear, Jeffrey Rush. Oh, that's right, Jeffrey Rush. And I think this was after he won his Oscar.
That's what he said, Jeffrey Rush. Ben Stiller, of course.
There's a lot of kind of subversive humor going on there. It looks goofy because that's what they played up in the trailers, but it's actually pretty clever, I think.
It's clever and darker than you think.
Yeah.
If you've only ever heard of it or watched, like you said, watched the trailer or seen the marketing, you probably aren't going to get exactly what you think you're going to get.
Because, I mean, let's face it, if I was a marketer faced with selling you on this movie, I'm not entirely sure how I'd do it.
It's kind of funny, kind of depressing. Yeah, it's a tough sell.
Yeah, but it's good. I like it a lot. I think you'll enjoy it. Lots of good funny lines. There's a bit with the spleen. I literally fell into the floor of the theater laughing so hard. I'm not lying. I have witnesses.
You might have damaged your spleen.
I might
in
have.
fact.
I might have vented it. So we got 2 movies to go here.
Next movie on the list, something that should be on everyone's agenda.
You should see this. How could you even go and not see this? I don't know. Superman 2.
Superman 2.
The Legend of Curly's Gold. No, just
The
Superman
Adventure
2.
Continues, Part 3. This time it's personal.
Of course, mostly directed by Richard Donner, but not entirely.
If you don't know the story, the Salkins, a famous European producing family, hired Richard Donner to direct, actually, I believe it was 3 installments of Superman.
I think so.
And ended up shit-canning him after the first installment, and he was shooting Part 1 and Part 2 concurrently.
Yep. This was not done a lot back then.
This was fairly novel at the time, but shooting Part 1 and Part 2 concurrently, so he'd shot a good deal of the footage for Superman 2 before the Salkins got rid of him. And he and the Salkins, particularly Ilya Salkin, butted heads constantly over the theme of the movie. Because Ilya Salkin is kind of, I don't want to call him stupid because he's not really stupid. He's a smart businessman, but he really doesn't understand the artistic end of it at all, like a lot of producers don't.
Right. They just don't get Superman.
That's right. And he wanted to put a lot of corny shit into it, and Dick Donner kept saying, "You can't do it. You've got to be kind of serious about the material and respect it, or it's going to be corny and no one's going to enjoy it."
Right. Right.
Which, of course, produced the great Superman 1 and most of what's good about Superman 2.
Mm-hmm. But you can see parts of it, though, because 2 is the bridge, and 3, they went too far in the corny.
Well, and that's the man that ended up finishing up Superman 2 was Richard Lester, who also directed the disastrous Superman 3 that basically killed the franchise for, a decade. With the one with Richard Pryor in it. And that's what the Salkins wanted. They wanted a nonstop, goofy, jokey mess, which, of course, everything that's good about Superman 1 and Superman 2 came from Richard Donner and his writing partner, Tom Mankiewicz. And everything bad about
Richard
Superman
Lester
2 and Superman
and the
3
Salkins.
was the Salkins and Richard Lester.
Yep.
But luckily, there's not a whole lot of Richard Lester in Superman 2.
No, what is there is glaring, but it doesn't ruin the movie.
And maybe the greatest line still to this day.
Oh, I was going to get to it if you didn't.
In any superhero movie ever.
Yep.
When Superman shows back up after the
preach it.
The renegade Kryptonians have laid waste and threatened mankind itself. And Superman appears outside the window of the Daily Planet and says to General Zod, "General, would you care to step outside? And then the ass whooping commences.
That's right.
Son.
That's right. So disappointed that line did not make it into the Man of Steel.
Yep. Even as old as it is, it sends a tingle up my spine. I'm tingling right now to think about it. It was one of the coolest moments I had ever seen in movies as a kid.
Well, it's just unadulterated badass.
Yes. Because think of everything he's saying when he says
exactly. Superman, he was not being everything was right there.
Yep.
He's like, y'all come out here because I'm going to whoop your ass. That's everything he was saying.
Devastation is about to occur. Because
Exactly.
Superman's not going to get loud. He's not going to scream. He's not going to throw a fit. He's not going to be like Will Smith trying to fight the alien in Independence. Come on, where you at? Where you at? Come on, I'm a buddy. Superman's not going to do that.
That green shit at me.
Shooting that green shit. He said to this dude, would you care to step outside?
And it really, it
was on like Donkey Kong.
We could spend an entire podcast talking about it, but it's just Superman boiled down. That's the kind of thing a corn-fed Kansas boy would say
when he was about to
whoop some ass.
When he was about to go to your bottom. That's exactly what he'd say.
So you've got that, but you've got it being said by an alien with godlike powers talking to three other aliens with godlike powers.
Yep.
And not in doubt about the outcome.
No, sir. No. It was not a bit of hesitation. He knew exactly what was about to occur.
Exactly. We might have doubted, but he did not.
And, obviously, Superman 3, a tragic disappointment. Superman 4, even worse than Superman 3.
But you were talking earlier, and Superman 3 killed it for a while, and I'm like, and then they dug up the corpse and defiled it.
Publicly defiled it with Superman 4. But as bad as Superman 3 and 4 were, the best parts of 1 and 2 were so good that probably no one will ever be Superman in the same indelible way that Christopher Reeve was.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because at his best moments, he was the very embodiment of everything good about the Superman mythos. I remember Margot Kidder saying he wasn't acting. Chris Reeve was that man. He was a decent person. He would have walked into a burning building to get a kid out of it, et cetera, et cetera. There was nothing fake about him. Christopher Reeve respected the role, took it very seriously, and apparently wasn't in all aspects the sort of character we would like to think Superman really would have if he were a real person.
Yep. And I think it bears it out. Anybody who's seen it, what do they remember about it? They don't. You don't hear them talking about the shit that sucked.
No.
Really. So,
because there's a lot of bad parts to Superman 2.
Oh yeah.
But there's enough good stuff, and Christopher Reeve's enough of a great presence that it's still probably ranks as one of the top 10, 15 superhero movies of all time.
Yep, I would say. Last but not least, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, film for theaters.
He was on a half shell.
Turtle Power.
Power.
This is, of course, the live-action Ninja Turtles that came out, I think it was 90?
That sounds
somewhere
right.
in there. Surprisingly good. Better than it had any right to be.
There's no way that anybody would have thought this would be anything other than the shittiest movie mankind had ever produced. Yep. But turned out being pretty good. Well, you can tell me what you think, but I think largely on the strength of the excellent costumes produced by Jim Henson's company.
Well, that was a huge part of it because you had to believe that they were 4 turtles and not 4 dudes running around in costumes.
Right.
I believe I read this story somewhere, just an interesting bit of trivia. I think it was shot in North Carolina, as many of these were. But B, I remember reading a story about problems during production because the turtle masks were motorized and remote control, so they could make the lips move and the eyes and etc. And they were filming near an airport, and apparently the radio traffic at the airport would cause
activate.
Would activate the masks. So the turtles would suddenly start freaking out and speaking, having a conniption. So I just hate that no footage from that exists.
Yeah, I don't know if that's apocryphal or not, but I've heard the same story,
Yeah.
that the servos could be triggered
Just
by
random RF. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and apparently twist and transmogrify the turtle mask in truly horrific things.
Really would have scarred a lot of kids for life with.
The thing about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the production value that the movie really has because of those costumes, which were produced by the Jim Henson Company, and also what sort of catapulted the movie into production was the success of the cartoon version, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, those of you who don't know, and it might be many or even most of you, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, and in its original form is a fairly graphic, hardcore comic book.
Yep.
It was made as sort of a parody of the Frank Miller comic books that were out at the time. And it's fairly violent, and it's fairly sexual, and it's fairly, and then they toned all that down drastically for the cartoon. But then the movie is actually kind of a hybrid of the two. It's not as goofy as the cartoon is.
It's a really good distillation of the two because, you've got your comedy, you've got your pizza eating, etc., but there's some really good fight scenes in it. It has a fair amount of gravity. There's the
given what it is.
Yeah.
It's it is surprisingly good. I haven't seen this really in a long time either, so I'm looking forward to that.
I think it was also at the time the most successful independent film ever. I want to say.
Yeah.
At the time,
it was hugely successful.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another one to go check out for nostalgia's sake or just cause, Let's see.
If for no other reason, it's worth seeing because you're just not the time of those sort of practical effects and costumes is coming to an end, and you're probably, other than the sort of things that Rick Baker does now for really high end A-list, $400 and $300 million budgeted movies, you're probably not going to see practical. That's the sort of thing that would only be really attempted with CG nowadays.
Yep. I can't imagine them. They'd put golf balls or ping pong balls on their head and do it Avatar style.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the lineup for ComiQuest, and of course we'll have the links in the show notes as we have had up to this point, and you can go check out your listings and whatnot. So I think we've got just enough time left in the show for maybe one more conversation, maybe not even as fleshed out as we should have, but I feel like we should talk about it.
Just a quick mention.
Yep, just a little bit.
Maybe talk about it more next time.
Yep. The X-Men Days of Future Past trailer was released this past week. And what'd you think there, Matt?
Well, I was extremely impressed with the tone that they seem to be taking. If you've never read the Days of Future Past X-Men storyline, it's one of those major 80s story arcs, along with Dark Phoenix and a few others, Fall of the Mutants, that really sort of, by Chris Claremont, that really sort of, solidified and made the X-Men the phenomenon they later came to be.
It's worth mentioning that, like, if you just go look for Days of Future Past, there are like 2 issues are the Days of Future Past story, but they've gone back and dipped into it so many times over the years. There's really more to it than that.
Because it's enormously popular at the time of its publication. So
if you were to, like, I don't even know how many comics you would have to read to get the full picture. The original story was 2 issues and would really give you enough to go on. But yeah, a lot of things for the movie you can tell in the trailer were borrowed from later visitations of the same story. Bishop, the character Bishop, for example.
I was going to mention that too, that basically this seems to be a distillation of not just the original storyline, but from a lot of the best parts of all the expansions over the years.
Right. And pretty much any time travel story that the X-Men have been involved in, it looks like has been pulled into this trailer.
Pretty much. One of the things that you notice right off the bat is the Days of Future Past, the main character was Kitty Pryde.
Yep.
And they seem to have replaced her role in terms of, I don't want to spoil anything, but her role in terms of the time travel with Wolverine.
Yeah.
Which is only logical, because you're not going to...
Yeah. I've seen a lot of griping about that, which I understand it, but when you look at the way the movies have gone to this point, there's really not much other way they can do it.
There's just no possible way you could make a $300 million movie and have Kitty Pryde be the star of it.
Right.
It's not realistic.
She just hasn't been set up. I mean, and even if she had, the character's just not prominent enough.
Wolverine was obviously probably the most important X-Men in the comics as well, but when you're doing 12 issues a year, you can have much more of an ensemble piece.
You got room to spread out.
And you can feature different characters. When you're coming out with one X-Men movie every 2 years or 3 years, and you're spending $300 million on it, my impression also is that Kitty's going to play a pretty important role in the movie.
Yeah.
But they've sort of given her main role to Wolverine for just purposes of commerciality, probably.
Yeah. And that's just how that is. And you can either accept the reality of it or
you
not.
you can gripe and bitch.
Yeah.
I mean, the best they could have done, if you wanted Kitty Pryde to be the star of A Days of Future Past, then you were only ever going to get that on a maybe a cartoon version of the X-Men.
Right. Yeah. That can't imagine that ever happening in any sort of film form. I thought I was a little underwhelmed by the trailer, personally. I guess because, to me, I don't have a lot of the complaints we were just talking about. I do not mind that Wolverine was made the main character. I don't mind that Professor X and Magneto are basically the other two legs on the three-legged chair of Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto. I don't really mind that. I don't mind the story deviations I've seen, although, and that's kind of my gripe, is that it's basically a mood piece. The trailer wants to tell you that, this is serious, and here's a bunch of images,
right?
Which, I didn't connect to it necessarily because, to me it was just a pastiche of, here's a dude, 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 and it's serious.
This guy's sad. This guy's intense.
Exactly.
Right.
And some shit's going on. So, yeah. I would have liked to have seen just, not so much quick cutting, not so much parading of characters, because they showed some characters that, the comics people are like, wow, I'm surprised that this person is in the movie, which I feel like they're probably going to be in there a minute or two in the whole movie.
You've seen in some of the past X-Men.
Right. So I felt like there was a little too much of that, but, I understand that's to kind of hook in the more hardcore fans than me, but I just wanted to see a little more storytelling in the trailer is my only gripe.
We'll see. I mean, I'm a big fan actually now of trailers not revealing much, at least in the initial one. I think really the mood is all you want to reveal at this point in the movie, but we'll see. Bryan Singer is directing this installment, and he has not failed in any sequel that he has directed thus far.
Right.
To my mind, he did a fair job in the original X-Men, and then did a wonderful, fantastic job in X2.
Yep, my favorite one. Yep, I think most people's probably.
Yeah, I think that's pretty universal. And of course, he's directing this one, and people don't know it's a fusion between the X-Men cast from the original X-Men movies and the X-Men cast as portrayed in their younger days from X-Men First Class.
Yep.
So,
which was another surprisingly good movie, and even though he didn't direct it, I felt like he produced it. Bryan Singer, his influence was heavily felt in that one, I'd say.
Seemed like that to me too.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that'll be a good movie regardless. I mean, I had some quibbles with the trailer, but I really have no qualms about the film. I think it's going to be good. It's hard to imagine them going very wrong with that one. I say that very wrong in terms of making a movie I find entertaining. Now, of course,
Right.
they're going to drift a lot from the comics because they've got to distill all that down into a 2-hour movie, and make it palatable.
They've got to distill it all down in a 2-hour movie, and a 2-hour movie that people are going to want to spend enough money on that they make their $200 million back.
Exactly, and that somebody who has not read 20 years worth of X-Men is going to want to see.
We should probably mention that the story was co-written by Matthew Vaughn, who was the director of X-Men First Class. So
Yep. So
it's kind of an all-star lineup.
exactly in terms of cast and crew.
Yep. The music is by John Ottman, who's a great composer that's done Superman Returns. He did just a huge number of really good soundtracks over the last, dozen or so years.
Yep. So that'll be good. We probably going to talk more about that next time. Because there's definitely more to be said, but we didn't want to let it go unsaid. Some other stuff we wanted to cover this time, we're just not going to have time to get to. I forgot to mention it during the announcement earlier, but it's of course Godzilla's 59th birthday was yesterday, November 3rd. So that's pretty awesome.
Big G.
And of course, apropos, then that will be sponsoring that movie here in the very near future.
So yeah, let's give them those dates again. So the ComiQuest film series
Starts Friday.
and the NC Comicon this weekend.
Yep.
And they're adjacent to one another. The con is in the
It's in the Marriott.
called? Yeah, the Marriott, which is
the Durham Convention Center.
Durham Convention Center at the Marriott, which is directly adjacent to the Carolina Theater.
It's literally attached to it.
Yep.
There's a magical door in the Carolina Theater.
It's like going through the wardrobe.
Exactly.
In Chronicles of Narnia.
The change in decor is so jarring that, yes, that's what it feels like.
You walk in and suddenly you're in a 1920s movie theater.
Yep. So yeah, that's this weekend. Again, the showing of Gojira.
Gojira!
Sponsored by your boys here. That's going to be Friday, December 6th at 7 p.m. Now, we should say it's a fine retro Phantasma tradition to not start on time.
Yeah, there's no... If you think you're not going to get there until 7:30, still come.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're not going to miss anything.
Yeah, exactly. I would be shocked if they were rolling before 7:45.
That's typically right around 7:40, 7:45.
They have door prizes, etc.
There's
Jim,
exciting theme music. Jim comes up,
Yep.
talks to the folk. They give away really cool little door prizes.
Yep.
And yeah, it's usually 7:45 before the whole thing gets
so don't worry about
popped
that.
off.
If we'll of course be hugely offended if you only decide to come for the second half of that show, but we understand, and that's fine because you're still contributing to the lovely Carolina Theater.
Which is worthwhile in and of itself, but that's not going to protect you from the shunning.
Exactly, the shunning is going to happen. So
It's the shunning.
the shunning, the shunning. I'll get sued. So yeah. I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Do you have anything you would like to add, sir?
No, I just hope folks come out. The ComiQuest Film Festival this weekend, NC Comicon, both great events right in the heart of lovely, the jewel of the Triangle area, Durham, North Carolina.
Absolutely. And we'll see you there. I'm going to let Godzilla play us out here. All right, we'll see y'all next week.
Later.